The first time I shook his hand, I didn't know I was shaking the hand of the man who had been sleeping with my wife for 8 months. He smiled. Firm grip. Expensive watch. "Welcome to the team," he said. "I've heard great things." I had no idea that 3 floors below us, in a conference room I hadn't been cleared to enter yet, there was a shared calendar with a recurring event labeled Q3 Sync, and that Q3 Sync was a hotel 4 blocks from the office. My name is Daniel. This is the story of how I got promoted into my own worst nightmare. Part 1. The promotion. 6 months ago, none of this made sense yet. My wife Renee worked as a senior operations director at a logistics firm downtown. I worked in finance, mid-level, comfortable but restless. We'd been married for 7 years, 2 kids, Maya, 5, and Theo, 3. On paper we were fine, better than fine. We had a house with a yard, a dog neither of us wanted but both of us loved, and a Sunday morning routine that involved pancakes and too much coffee. Renee talked about her boss constantly. His name was Marcus. Marcus this, Marcus that. Marcus is finally letting me run point on the West Coast expansion. Marcus stayed late to help me prep the board deck. Marcus says I have the sharpest read on logistics risk he's seen in a decade. I never thought twice about it. Bosses get talked about, that's just office life. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from a recruiter. A logistics company, a growing one, aggressive, well-funded, was hiring a head of finance. The salary was almost double what I was making. The recruiter said the CEO had specifically asked for someone with my background after seeing my name come up through a mutual connection. I went through 4 rounds of interviews. I didn't think much about the fact that I never once heard the CEO's name before the final round. Startups are weird like that sometimes. Layers of gatekeeping, executive assistants running interference. In the final round, I walked into a glass-walled office on the top floor, and a man in his mid-40s stood up from behind the desk, hand extended. "Marcus Kellerman," he said. "Great to finally put a face to the resume." I didn't clock it right away. Marcus is a common enough name. It wasn't until I got home that night, buzzing about the offer, and told Renee the CEO's name, that I watched her face do something I'd never seen it do before. It went completely still. "Marcus Kellerman," she repeated slowly. That's actually my boss's name too, small world." I laughed. "What a coincidence," I said. "Maybe we'd even end up doing cross-company projects together someday." She laughed too, a little too fast, a little too loud. I took the job 2 weeks later. Part 2. The cracks. The first few weeks at the new company were a blur of onboarding, org charts, and trying to memorize 40 new names. Marcus was charismatic in that specific way successful people often are. He remembered details about your life, asked about your kids by name after hearing them mentioned once, made you feel like the smartest person in the room during a meeting, even when you'd said maybe 6 words. I liked him. That's the part that still makes my stomach turn when I think back on it. I liked him. Renee and I still talked about our work at dinner, the way we always had, but something had changed. She'd stopped mentioning Marcus at all. Not once, in 3 straight weeks, after 2 years of "Marcus said" being a near daily phrase in our house. I noticed the silence before I noticed anything else. Absence is its own kind of evidence if you're paying attention. I wasn't yet. The first real crack came from something stupid, a parking receipt. I was cleaning out Renee's car to take it in for an oil change, and a stack of receipts fell out of the center console. Most were nothing: coffee, dry cleaning, gas. But one was a hotel parking validation ticket from a boutique hotel across town, dated a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks earlier. Renee had told me that day she was at a supplier walkthrough until 6. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was probably a client lunch that ran long, a meeting moved somewhere convenient. I wanted an explanation that let me keep living the life I had. Then it happened again, and again. Always a Tuesday or a Thursday, always somewhere between 1 and 5 in the afternoon, always a plausible work reason attached if you didn't look too closely. I started looking too closely. Part 3. The discovery. I want to be honest about something most stories like this skip over. I didn't hire a private investigator in some dramatic decision. I found out because Renee got careless, and because I finally let myself stop pretending I hadn't noticed. It was a Thursday night. She was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand and a message preview flashed across the lock screen from a contact saved as Q3 Sync, Marcus K. Can't stop thinking about Tuesday. Tell D you have the vendor call again next week. D. Me. Daniel. They had a code for lying to me and it fit in 3 words. I stood there in our bedroom holding her phone, and everything about the last 8 months rearranged itself in my head at once. The vanished Marcus stories, the parking receipts, the sudden new job offer that had felt, in hindsight, less like a coincidence and more like something being managed. Because here's the thing I hadn't let myself think yet. What if the job offer hadn't been a coincidence at all? What if Marcus hadn't just been sleeping with my wife? What if he'd been the one who orchestrated hiring me specifically to keep me close, keep me distracted, keep me grateful and busy, and underneath him on an org chart where I'd never think to question anything he did? I didn't confront Renee that night. I want to be clear about why, because I think it's the most important decision I made in this entire story. I didn't have enough yet. An accusation without proof just gives the other person time to get their story straight, delete what needs deleting, and turn you into the paranoid one. I needed to know the full shape of it before I said a single word. So I started paying attention like my life depended on it. Because in a lot of ways, it did. Part 4. Building the case. Over the next 6 weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one, I was the calm, competent new head of finance, sitting across from Marcus in leadership meetings, nodding at his quarterly projections, laughing at his jokes about airline delays. In the other, I was quietly assembling a timeline. I didn't touch Renee's phone again. One lucky glance was luck. A pattern of snooping would be something else, and something a lawyer could use against me later if this went where I suspected it would. Instead, I paid attention to what was already visible to me as an employee. Corporate credit card statements, calendar invites synced to the shared executive calendar I now had access to, expense reports. Q3 Sync appeared 11 times over 5 months. Every single instance lined up with a receipt from Renee's company for a vendor meeting on the exact same day. Then I found something I hadn't expected. The expense reports for those Q3 Sync meetings were being charged to a discretionary executive fund with almost no oversight. A fund that, as the incoming head of finance, I was about to inherit full visibility into. Marcus hadn't just been recklessly having an affair with my wife. He'd been paying for hotel rooms and dinners with company money, misclassified as client development expenses. That single fact changed everything about my strategy. This wasn't just a marriage I needed to deal with anymore. This was fraud, sitting inside a company that had just made me responsible for its books. I kept building. I pulled the historical calendar data further back, 8 months, not 5. I found the exact week the Q3 Sync pattern started. It was 2 weeks before the recruiter first called me. Marcus hadn't hired me despite the affair. He'd hired me because of it. A husband on the payroll, grateful for a life-changing salary, embedded 3 floors below him, was the safest kind of husband to have. Part 5. The unraveling. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I did something Marcus never saw coming, because men like him only prepare for the confrontations they expect. I requested a full financial audit of the discretionary executive fund. Routine. Standard practice for any incoming finance head. Nothing that would raise a single eyebrow from the board. I was thorough, methodical, and completely unemotional about it on paper. Underneath, I built a private file. Every mismatched expense report, every Q3 Sync, every dollar spent on hotel rooms disguised as client dinners. At home, I said nothing to Renee. I let her keep believing she had the upper hand of a secret. I watched her lie to my face about her schedule 3 more times, and each time, instead of anger, I felt something colder and more useful settle into place. Clarity. 6 weeks after I found that text message, I walked into a scheduled meeting with the board's audit committee, a meeting Marcus didn't know was happening because it wasn't about him. It was about expense fund irregularities, and I was simply the finance director doing my job. I laid out the pattern. 11 Q3 Sync meetings, 11 matching hotel charges, 11 days that corresponded, hour for hour, with unexplained absences on my own wife's work calendar. Information I presented not as a personal grievance, but as a documented conflict of interest risk between the CEO and an employee at a partner company, funded improperly with corporate money. I never once said the word affair in that room. I didn't need to. The board could do that math themselves, and they did, within about 4 minutes of silence that felt like an hour. Part 6. The Fallout. Marcus was placed on administrative leave within 72 hours, pending a full external audit. He resigned 17 days later, before the audit even finished, which told the board everything it needed to know. Renee was let go from her position 2 weeks after that, not because her company found out about the affair specifically, but because the audit at my company triggered a parallel review at hers once the vendor relationship came under scrutiny, and her name surfaced in a way that made her position untenable. I filed for divorce the same week I filed the audit request, not after, the same week. I wanted both processes moving before either of them realized how much ground they'd already lost. The board asked me to stay on. I did, for a while, long enough to help stabilize the finance department during a leadership transition. But every hallway in that building had become a hallway I once walked as a man who didn't know his wife's affair partner had built the very career I was standing on. I left 8 months later, on my own terms, with a severance package I didn't need but took anyway. People ask me sometimes if I regret not confronting them the moment I found that text. I don't. If I'd screamed, thrown the phone, demanded answers that night, I would have gotten lies. Fast, practiced, coordinated lies, because by then, they'd clearly had months of practice covering for each other. Instead, I got the truth, documented, dated, and undeniable, in a form neither of them could talk their way out of. Marcus taught me something during our very first handshake without meaning to. He said he'd heard great things about me. He had no idea how much he'd end up teaching me about patience and about what it costs to underestimate the man you think you've already beaten.